Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co-host, Aiden McCrone. And Aiden, not the show we expected to have this week, going into Sunday's game against Ohio State. Michigan State, a 9.5-point favorite. A lot of excitement because Xavier Booker gets his first career start. Michigan State was in control for most of the game, had a 12-point lead with 11 minutes left, and proceeds to score 7 points in the final 11 minutes of the game and gets beat on a buzzer beater. So just, again, not the way we expected that game to go. And here we are now as February comes to an end, and Michigan State's in about as cloudy as a place as I can remember after these back-to-back losses to Iowa and Ohio State. We've got some talking points to get through tonight, but I guess your initial reaction to the game that we saw and how it finished.
Yeah, I mean, you like to use this word a lot, but debacle. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really all you can say. I mean, yeah, Xavier Booker gets his first career start. Crowd loved it. I think,
Sure.
fans were really happy to see that he was getting, some respect and, against a team that he matched up with pretty well. I mean, I think Izzo talked about in his press conference again after the Iowa game about how to get him on the floor, and he said he was looking for the right matchup for him, and they found it. And I thought he played well. I think a lot of people will, allude to the fact that he didn't play the last 15 minutes of the game after he had a pretty strong performance in the first half and started off strong in the second half. But yeah, I mean, as we talk about it more, I think, there are a lot of other things that they could control throughout that game, that could have prevented a loss. And, that last shot, just thinking about it, there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, he had the hand in his face and everything. And he just made the play.
Right.
But yeah, it really is a debacle just to watch that and the whole meltdown. Yeah, it was not fun to watch by any means. It was very frustrating, I think, from my perspective at least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tyson is in good position there. He's got the hand in the face, and the guy makes a tough shot. But Michigan State should have never been in that situation. And it goes back to a lot of we're a couple days out now from the game, so a lot of this discussion's already gone on, but we're going to reiterate some of it here. It's just the rotation of the big, some of the lineups that were thrown out there. It was great to see Xavier Booker start, and I think he played well in the 17 minutes that he had. 7 points, 3 rebounds, 3 blocks. Yeah, got beat a couple times on defense, got beat on the boards a few times. Neither one of us and most of the Michigan State community, or at least a good portion of the people who know what they're talking about, they knew that Xavier Booker wasn't like the savior of the program who's going to come in and just light the world on fire. It was more so about, here's a young kid with a lot of talent, who had to work his way to being a tougher, stronger player. Added the 20 pounds this year, and at this point, like, why not give him a shot? That was kind of what the plea was. We got to see that. That first 6.5 minute stint that he was out there is a long stint. You could tell he was gassed by the end of it, needed a break, but I thought he played well. And yeah, there's going to be things that you're going to have to live with as a coaching staff with a young player like Booker, and it's going to be the occasional defensive breakdown. It's going to be he got out tough for a board on it. But Michigan State's not a very good rebounding team, even with some of these other bigs out there. So I don't understand, as much as I get like the sentiment of Mady Sissoko, he's a better rebound, so we're going to have him out there. It's just there's so many other things that Xavier Booker brings on the offensive end, and as you struggle to score down the stretch, to leave him on the bench and to play Sissoko down the stretch. Just didn't like the decision. 7 points in 11 minutes. I think that kind of speaks to it right there.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk about the lineups, but
Yes.
yeah, I think Sissoko, yeah, it's just, I think, his role, you've talked about the fact that he's a role player, not really kind of your starting center. And against Ohio State, I mean, that showed. I think the one thing about Sissoko, I will say that he does well is he's, along with, I guess trying to rebound. I think nobody on this team is really that great of a rebounder.
Right.
But I think he shoots free throws well. I think that's one thing that had kept him in the last 15 minutes. But that I still don't think that excuses the fact that Booker didn't play at all. But I do see kind of some reasoning behind that. I mean, Cooper was in foul trouble the whole game, and Kohler kind of got his regular minutes, but yeah, at the end of the game, it was Sissoko in at the end. We didn't see Booker whatsoever, and yeah, I mean the lineups. I think it's hard because I think I've said this a few times, but I feel like MSU doesn't have really an identity of whether they're more of an offensive or defensive team, especially without the rebounding. Um, I think they have to commit to being an offensive, having an offensive identity, because they do have good enough guards defensively, and they don't have good enough defensive bigs, so they need to commit to offense more, especially with Akins and how well Walker has played throughout the season. I know he's kind of in a slump now, but he's still Tyson Walker. So I think that kind of answers the question a little bit with the lineup. And I think, we saw in the second half, we saw a Booker Sissoko lineup with the two bigs. And I think that's got to transition a little more to Kohler and Booker, especially if you want some more scoring up front. And Malik Hall is kind of the 4 guy. He doesn't really play 3 that much. But I think that if you were to commit to a 2 big lineup, it would have to be Hall at the 3 with Booker at the 4, and then you can choose, you can have your pick between Kohler, Sissoko, or Cooper. But I really think it's got to be the young guys. I think, the senior class, they are who they are. Malik Hall's really bloomed this year into being a consistent player, and he was consistent again against Ohio State, and I thought he played well. But the rest of those guys, I saw, Tyson Walker seemed hesitant. It really seemed uncharacteristic of him, and he was timid, and I haven't seen that all season from him. We saw that, I think when he first came to MSU, where he kind of struggled to look for shots and didn't really know, right and wrong. And then, this year has been a massive breakthrough, and he struggled and, looked a little shy, and that just makes it even more important for, Akins to come up big. And, Hogard didn't really do a whole lot.
He wasn't bad, but not special either.
Yeah, right. Like there wasn't anything that stuck out. He didn't have any crazy bad turnovers, but he didn't make any flashy plays, and I think he only scored like 5 points or 7 points or something like that. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think, they have to commit a lot more to offense, especially since the guards have done well defensively.
Right. Gregory brings up the fact that, Michigan State's lost 50 games in the last 3+ years. Is predicting 2 more against Purdue and Northwestern. We're going to talk about Michigan State's tournament projections towards the end of the show tonight, so we will come back to that. Jason points out that Booker was +11 against Ohio State, and then doesn't play the last 15 minutes. He was far and away the and plus minus is not a perfect stat. Like it's not the be all end all, but it is somewhat telling for sure. And it is useful. And so, yeah, that's absolutely one of the things I noticed at the end of the game too, was that Booker was plus 11, best on the team. Another reason why him not getting any run towards the end of the game was surprising and certainly baffling. I've got another thought on that in a second, just kind of going through the comment section here. I do want to talk about, Booker and down the stretch a little bit, because it was, I think it was time. I was surprised when Xavier Booker got the start. There was a little bit of a rumblings. I got to the game about an hour early. I like to do that. There was some rumblings about, a change up to the lineup. I assumed maybe it would be Cooper and starting in for Sissoko. Didn't really even consider the fact it would be Booker, because my attitude has been over the last week or 2 weeks has been like, Izzo's been very complimentary of Booker, but I'll believe it when I see it, because we've heard this now for a while.
Right.
That was my attitude. And so I see that Booker is starting. It's like, well, okay, that's me seeing it, so I believe it now. And you played a decent amount of minutes, the most minutes he's played in quite a bit. The thing I'll go to now, though, is I feel like it's a little bit of a half measure. It was almost like, because yes, you go to Booker early. He played well. He struggles in some areas. We understand that he's not a perfect player. But again, I still go back to Tom Izzo and trust, because down the stretch of the game, last 15 minutes, he doesn't play. And maybe that wasn't planned when he went out at the 15-minute mark, but as things get more and more tight, Tom didn't go back to him. And I still question whether the trust is there. Now, my rebuttal to that is this. We understand his limitations defensively and mostly on the glass, I would say would be the big thing with Booker. But what he brings offensively is what this team needs more than anything. I think you nailed it when you talked about more of an offensive approach, because he spaces the floor. He allows more room for Malik Hall to do what he does best, and that's post up, especially in the mid-range. He opens things up for the guards to drive and dish. I do want to talk about the two big lineup. It works better with Booker out there, because he doesn't have to be 4 feet from the basket to make an impact. He is a floor spacer. So I still question the trust factor with Izzo, just based on the way he approached Booker down the stretch. And so I still feel like Booker starting was a half measure. I would like to see both feet now in the pool of let this kid play. Let's talk about the two big lineups, because it was baffling on Sunday. At one point, now that first stretch, it was a long start to the game where the under 4 minute timeout didn't happen until there was like a minute and a half in. So it was a long stretch, a lot of tired bodies out there. Booker needed to come out at that point, but it's Cooper and Sissoko in at the same time, right after that first media timeout. And I can't remember if Cohen Carr subbed in at the same time as well, but like, you've got 3 non-shooters on the floor together. And I think you had, Trey Holloman and Tyson Walker. That should send red flags immediately as soon as you see Sissoko, Cooper, and Carr all out there at the same time. And we like Cohen Carr. Like, we've advocated for more time for Cohen Carr as well, but that's not the time to have him in the game when you've got two bigs in at the same time who can't score outside of mostly putbacks.
Right.
And that wasn't the only time that happened. There was another stretch in the second half, I believe, that the same thing happened, where it was a 2 big lineup and Carr's out there as well. There was somebody got a clip of Izzo from the TV broadcast, and you can hear him. If you read his lips, he says it's a bad lineup. I don't know exactly what part of the game that was, but I have a feeling it was when that lineup was out there. So react to that, I guess, Aiden. Like, I was baffled by it.
Yeah, and especially against Ohio State, who, Okpara was, part of the reason why Booker started was Okpara is a young center who he could match up, decently against. But their bigs were not, they weren't the same kind of bigs as Purdue has or Wisconsin has, where they run, 2 post players, like true post players who are, towers that are both 6'10". No, they ran it with, Okpara, who is kind of a similar to build to Booker, maybe a little bit, more muscle. And then they had Devin Royal for majority of the game, who had his best game of the season, who's a freshman that, side note, MSU recruited last year and lost out on to Ohio State. But yeah, at the same time, yeah, I think especially matchup wise, it didn't seem right. I think, Carr figuring that out. I think he's kind of in. I think there's a little bit more trust with Carr than there is with Booker, but at the same time, I think there's a little bit of a struggle to find his role of, he can't really shoot. So can he play the three? He is really good in transition, obviously. But where can he do that offensively? And then defensively, is he a four? I mean, he's only 6'5". So can he guard a four-man in the post specifically? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions, I think, but again, I think, there's a lot more trust with Carr than there is with Booker, but he's still kind of a guy that they don't really know what his role is, and figuring out that matchup can be hard to find. But at the same time, he's so athletically gifted that you can't keep him off the floor for the amount of time that he's sitting on a bench. So I think it's really hard. I think right now, again, like part of also the offensive identity is moving away from a two big lineup as well. I know I'm a little contradicting myself a little bit, but when you look at a team like Alabama, who's, very uber offense, they've recruited, I think, like 2 centers in the last 4 years. And, one of those dudes went pro early, and they've rolled out, lineups of just, 5 guys that are 6'7" or smaller. And they've rolled that out, and, they've won a lot more games than MSU has within the last 4 years. So yeah, I think finding that identity is tough, but that's why I pay Izzo a lot of money and they don't pay me anything. So
for sure. Cohen only played 7 minutes against Ohio State. Booker played 17, as I mentioned earlier. My issue is when they put Cohen out there, they didn't give him a chance to really make the impact, give a chance to do what he's good at. And that's getting out on the floor and running, and cutting back door and things because the defense's attention's on other outside threats. But that's the other thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, is that Cohen's at his best when he's going to the basket, and yet you put 2 big guys down there. So where does he have to go? Even if he did catch the ball and attack the basket, he's going to run into 2 big guys, and so it just didn't make any sense. There's a couple in the comments section is talking about Izzo's not in charge of the lineup. It's Coach Woj. Hey, I totally understand that, but he's the head coach too, so he can look at Coach Woj and say, hey man, what are you doing? Get so and so out, and I don't know, and we could do a segment on the rotations and whether or not Coach Woj is I don't think he's doing a good job. I'll just say that, but I don't want to go into a whole thing with that. I think we've made our thoughts on the lineups pretty clear here. But yeah, just give Cohen a chance to do what he's good at, and that's running the floor, spacing the floor with shooters. I think that's actually a good segue into our next segment here, because I do think we need to talk about Tyson Walker. It's been a struggle over these last 4 games. I got the numbers in front of me. He's 20 for 54 overall. That's 37% from the field, and he's shooting 6 of 21 from 3. That's 28.6% from 3-point range. We know about the groin injury and just the nagging nature of that. I think part of this is he's getting so much of the defense's attention. Back to your point about, need to take a more of an offensive approach. You need to get more scoring threats on the floor so that teams can't key on Tyson Walker. He's clearly not 100%. You need to help him in as many ways as you can. But how concerned are you here, Aiden? Because Michigan State's got 3 games left, and then it's tournament time, and it's hard because you can't really let Tyson Walker get better. Like, I don't think it's going to get all that better, the injury. There's just too much prep and games and things like that. So where's your concern level with this? Because Michigan State needs Tyson Walker at his best in order to do anything in March.
Yeah, my concern level is pretty high right now, especially, that, the team is starting to decline. He's starting to decline. I think if they win that game against, Iowa, they win the game against Minnesota, they beat Ohio State. If they win those 3 games, I think, I mean, you could hypothetically rest him for this whole week and, just roll him out there against Purdue fully healthy, and you have nothing to lose. But now, after losing 2 games, you have everything to lose at this point, because you're now, I mean, we'll talk about it, about projections, but yeah, the tournament's no guarantee. So now you're playing with your back against the wall. Very similar to early this year, when they started off 4-5, and, very similar after they lost to, Nebraska and Wisconsin, 2 out of 3. So yeah, I mean, it always kind of, that feeling of back against the wall, it goes away for all of 5 seconds, and then it comes back after that they lose a game they shouldn't have. And really, that's all it is. And I think at this point, yeah, the concern level is high. I think the remedy for that is finding a more, I don't know, a better way to include Akins, because I think,
want to talk about him too.
Yeah, because I think, he was 1 for 9, I think, on Sunday against Ohio State. But at the same time, I think the shot selection could have been better. And I think that part of that is the role that he's in, as kind of a spot up guy and, off ball player. I think, again, I think I've been advocating this for a while, but I think he needs to get some more touches running the offense and leading that. And I don't know what's stopping that from happening. I don't know if it's leadership. I don't know if it's, does he know the offense as well as, Hogard or Walker? I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like, your second most athletic player, who is also your most athletic guard, should be, running the offense enough, or at least for some time, to, give some, energy, and give the offense a spark when it's, very much needed, because they played a really good first half defensively.
Oh yeah,
it was
excellent.
one of the best halves of defense they played all season.
Yep.
And it just, it went to waste. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, granted, I mean, Ohio State's limited offensively, but yeah, I agree with you. Michigan State was on top of things defensively throughout that first half. Obviously, we're speculating a little bit about, certain things, why certain things aren't going right. But like, Jaden's been here for 3 years, and so he should have a pretty good grasp on the offense. His usage has been strange. He's been kind of relegated to a spot up shooter or somebody who gets out in transition. Those kind of like the 2 things that Jaden does.
Yeah.
And when he's not hitting shots, he doesn't bring a whole lot else right now. I wanted to get to this comment by Steve. We're backtracking a little bit here, but he mentions Booker and not being ready to go right when he got out of college, which that's something that's been understood now for a while. I think the issue here is not so much recruiting guys who aren't ready right away. I do agree with Steve's point on certain levels, but I think this just highlights why Michigan State needed to go get a big guy in the transfer portal. I don't know what their scholarship situation is right now or this year or whatnot, but like if you go out and you get a guy in the transfer portal who can be the guy, and then Sissoko, Cooper are your rotational pieces while Booker is getting stronger and while Jackson is recovering from foot surgery. if you've got that guy who's your starter, then you can let these guys grow up naturally as the season progresses. So this, in my opinion, this just highlights again Izzo's stubbornness when it comes to the transfer portal. Now, granted, maybe he doesn't know that Jackson Kohler is going to have foot surgery and not be available, and we don't know what Jackson Kohler would look like this year had he not suffered that setback. That's been kind of we talked about that before. So that's when I read this comment, that was what I immediately went to, was like, yeah, that's where the transfer portal could have helped you out a little bit there. To allow Booker to build slowly through the season as he has, and work his way into that rotation. I think you did a good job of kind of illustrating the things with Akins, and you've been kind of on that throughout the whole season and been frustrated about his usage and things like that. Steve's talking about, it's the loyalty and sticking to guys that Izzo has shown, which that's admirable. I appreciate that as somebody who values relationship and values camaraderie and all those things. There absolutely is value there, but there's also college athletics has never been more of a business than it is right now. And part of that is, hey man, this is Michigan State, and there's a standard that we expect to meet, and this guy helps us meet that standard more than you do. Those are hard conversations, but those are conversations that need to go on. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit more in the final segment when we talk about Tom and in the future a little bit. I have a hard time. Actually, let's move into the tournament projections now at this point, and then they'll close out with Izzo in the future. I have a hard time believing Michigan State's going to go into Mackey Arena and win that game against Purdue on Saturday. Even with 5 days to prepare and all of that, it's just a tall task. It's a really hard place to play. Purdue, for all of its flaws in March and in tournament play, has been really good at Mackey, especially against Michigan State. So I'm concerned about that one. And then you've got Northwestern at home, Boo Buie, who's been a Spartan killer. That's a scary game. That's a scary game. And then Assembly Hall at Indiana. Now Indiana's not great. They're not necessarily a bad team, but they are very, very run of the mill, very average. But it's, again, another tough place to play. So Michigan State's lost 2 in a row now. After they beat Illinois, I think on this show I said I think they just punched their ticket. And it wasn't like they could lose the rest of their games and still go. It was just that I don't think they're going to lose to Iowa. I don't think they're going to lose to Ohio State. Yeah. So I think that's what my thought was. Well, fast forward a week and a half, and here we are. And Michigan State has lost those games. And so Michigan State's back on the bubble. You've got a tricky finish to the season here. So where are you at now with this with where Michigan State's at approaching the tournament?
Yeah, I think the good news is MSU still controls their own destiny. They do. I think the bad news is it doesn't feel like it. It really doesn't, because you do have to go to Mackey and play Purdue, and then you come back and host Northwestern, who I think they've lost the last 5 games against, dating back 3 years. And then you finish at Indiana, which again is another place that's tough to play, no matter how good or bad they are. Right. And then you have the Big Ten tournament where you're gonna get the bye. I think at this point there has to have a lot happen for you to not get at least one bye. So I think that's still there, but I think what they really have to do to stay in the tournament and stay in the field is beat Northwestern, beat Indiana, win at least one game in the Big Ten tournament. I think if you win, if you lose to Purdue and at Mackey, that's fine. If you take care of business against Northwestern, you win at Indiana against a lesser team, and then you win your first game in the Big Ten tournament, I think that's enough to secure a spot. And I think if you win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament, I think that definitely punches your ticket, no matter who it is, whether it's Purdue, Wisconsin, Illinois, or Northwestern. So really, I think, again, they still control their own destiny. So I think that's a glass half full kind of take, but at the same time, it doesn't quite feel like it, considering you are playing, arguably the best team in the country, followed by a team that you haven't beaten in, since any of those guys were there.
Sure.
And then you also have, a tough game against Indiana. And then if you somehow, play Purdue again, in the Big Ten tournament, that's going to be another, tough game. So I think, that's really where I'm at. And it comes down to, I think it does come down to, can Tyson Walker stay healthy? Because if he's, stays healthy and plays well, or if he's going to be playing injured, kind of like what we're seeing right now, will give us an answer of what kind of, whether or not they're going to be in the tournament to begin with.
Right. So I looked earlier before the show. ESPN, Fox Sports, and CBS Sports, they all have Michigan State projected as a 9 seed right now, which indicates that there is a little bit of room behind their heels. If you the peripheral, like up against the cliffside, there is a little bit of room still between their heels and the edge. But I agree with you. Like, I think if I can't picture Michigan State beating Purdue on the road right now, and so I'm just gonna pencil that in as a loss. I think if you win those last 2 regular season games, I think you've done enough to get in. You go 1-2 down the stretch, and now things are pretty dicey. You go 0-3, and things are very dicey. I think you're right. I think if you win both of those games, 1 Big Ten tournament game, 2 I think is a lock. You've locked yourself in. I think I agree with you on that. The unfortunate thing is you had a couple of games where you're a 9.5 point favorite against Iowa and Ohio State, couldn't get it done. Man, it seems like so long ago that and it was just the beginning of this month, Aiden, that we had a show, and your thing was they could go undefeated or 6-1 or whatever it was, and and I can't believe the way the wheels fell off last week. Did not see that coming at all. That loss to Ohio State. I was thinking about this as I was driving home that night, whether or not it was the worst loss of the season. I think it probably was the worst loss of the season. The loss to James Madison right at the beginning of the year was probably the most surprising, just because, Michigan State was top 5. We didn't know how good James Madison was at the time. And so that was probably the most surprising loss. But I think this was the worst loss of the year, where it's a team that's in the bottom of the Big Ten. They didn't have one of their best players available. Just really baffling. With that, let's close the show out now. It's a quicker show tonight. And this is a conversation that's been kind of going on now for a while, but like it's really been revisited now after this week, and it's Tom Izzo's future. We touched on this a little bit in the last show. Neither one of us were in the camp of, it's time for him to go. He's got to get out of here. I'm still not in that camp, but there are some concerning alarms and vibes. One of the things was in the post-game press conference, I was at the game against Ohio State, and I was there for the post-game press conference. Tom was about as defeated as I've seen him. And granted, I haven't covered the program. I've watched the program for a long time, but I haven't covered the program for long. It's only my second or two. I've been on the beat for 2.5, 3 years. He didn't seem to have a whole lot of answers. And that was a concern for me. And I heard a segment from, Mike Valeni and Rico, I think it was from yesterday. But they talked about how Tom doesn't seem to be enjoying college basketball right now with all the changes and the things that he values. So where are we at now with this, Aiden? Because if you would have asked me before this previous week, I probably would have said, yeah, I think Izzo will be around for 3 or 4 more years. I'm starting to question that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to tell. I think whether or not it's kind of the whole college basketball, as a whole, or it's kind of internal stuff, because I do think that it's only right for him to go out on his own terms, but at the same time, it's the standards that he set, the expectations that he set, that he's reached, consistently for the last 20 years, that make him, one of the greatest coaches of all time. And, he's not getting it done right now.
Right.
And he hasn't been doing it for the last 3 years, and especially this year. I think a lot of people were ready to erase kind of 2020 through 2022, because this year was built up to be, hey, this team is really good. They can make a run. And they can still do it. And, they still have the pieces to do it. But at the same time, I still think he should leave on his own terms, but there's gotta be something. There's gotta be a fire lit under him to, or to rejuvenate himself, or, find something inside of him to say, okay, I don't like the landscape of college basketball right now, but I'm still going to, pour my all into this team and really push the chips in, and, try to cash the chips, this year or next year, as much as possible. And I think that's kind of the fairy tale ending of going out into the sunset, making a Final Four or winning his second national championship. But right now, it looks way less likely than it is likely to happen. And
Right.
It's sad to see, but at the same time, it's got to be something that's got to happen quick, because I don't see him staying for 5 more years. I could see him staying for 2 or 3, but eventually I think he's just going to get fed up with either what's happening around MSU and kind of how the fan base feels, because I do think the fan base is very torn on this as well.
Yeah.
And I think he's either going to get fed up with the fan base, or he's going to get fed up with the landscape where he can't take it anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge that 2 things can be true at the same time, and that is,
Right.
we can appreciate everything that Tom Izzo has done for Michigan State basketball.
Mm-hmm.
He has been the face of the program throughout his tenure, but really, like when Michigan State won the national championship in 2000, like Tom Izzo became a household name. And he has been the face of the program really since that time. And all the Final Fours, all the Big Ten championships, the most Big Ten tournament championships. We can acknowledge all of that happened and acknowledge his greatness. We can also acknowledge that things have not gone good over these last 4 years, and either things need to change, or it is time for him to step away. Like, either that's kind of the ultimatum here. It's like, do some things differently and try some different things, or it's time to let somebody else take the reins. Like, I think both of those things can be true at the same time. And we're not, again, neither one of us, I've liked Tom Izzo. I've enjoyed him since some of my earliest sports memories are watching Michigan State basketball with my dad. And so I've liked him since time I was a kid. At some point, though, you've got to adjust. You've got to change. A lot has happened over these last 4 years, 5 years in just college athletics, and you do have to adapt or die. That's kind of the way things
Yeah.
go. And so I am interested to see. There's been some discussion about, should Michigan State miss the tournament? And I think we even talked about this a little bit in the last show about, do you think that would be enough to incite change? Maybe. But I think with the way that this season has played out, the preseason expectations and falling woefully short of them, if change doesn't happen regardless, I don't think it will ever happen in this regime. There's a comment about, is he headed for a D'Antonio like finish? I'll let you kind of take the ball on that, Aiden. We don't, obviously, Michigan State fans don't want to see that. D'Antonio, arguably the greatest football coach in Michigan State history. Obviously, Duffy Daugherty has a pretty good claim to that as well. But it ended in a bit of a whimper.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think, like you said, both can be right, where there is a decline, but you can still admire greatness and what happened in the past, but what's happening in the now, and what looking ahead, is it gonna dip back, or is it gonna come back up, or is it gonna keep dropping down? So I don't know. I think a lot of people have made that claim about, is it parallel to D'Antonio at the end of his career, and I don't think so. I think a lot of D'Antonio's issues at the end of his career, yes, part of it was coaching, but I think the amount of talent that Izzo is handling right now is a lot more than what D'Antonio, ever worked with. I think D'Antonio, a lot of it was, developing and a lot of low, 3-star, 2-star guys, and developing them into, high caliber players. And I think, Izzo is really good at developing, but I think he's working with a way larger talent pool and a way better talent pool. We look at the recruiting classes. Last year's recruiting class was 5th in the country. The upcoming one is, I think it's 12th or 13th. And, they've had plenty of top 10 classes and high-end talent. They're, outside of Tyson Walker, I think every player that's starting is a 4-star. And then you have, Booker, who's a 5-star. And besides Cooper too, I think, everyone else on that roster was a 4-star. So I think he's dealing with a lot of talent, and I think the development part is starting to decline a little, or I don't know if it's the development, or I don't know if it's the leadership from the team, or the team camaraderie, or what it is, but it does have to do with, I think it does have to do with the team, and a lot of that's on coaching, because I feel like every time MSU drops the ball and has a bad loss this year, I think we've put a lot of blame on players, and then they go out and respond after everyone badmouths them for a week. You can look back at the Baylor game, and go back to the Wisconsin game, and the first Illinois game, where everyone badmouths them, and then they kind of, it feels like they listen to us. It feels like they listen, not just us specifically, but just the fan base as a whole. And the outside noise of everyone's getting on them. And then they wake up and they play really well. So with that said, you can expect a win at Mackey. But I think that it's not, I feel like it's this team specifically, though, and the leadership, the leadership post Cassius, really.
Right.
I think,
and Tillman as well. He was also,
and Tillman as well. So I think that, that really hurts a ton, but it's fine, finding that next leader, because I do think there are some leaders on this team. I think a lot of people think that Jeremy Fears is really the next great leader. But obviously he's a freshman. And then you look at kind of the guys right now, you look at AJ Hogard, who is probably the most vocal. And then you have other leaders like Malik Hall and Tyson Walker, but it feels like they lead more by example, and they're a little more quiet, and, collected and stay to themselves. While Hogard and really Davis Smith is like the next most vocal player
Right.
that we've heard of. So, but yeah, that's really where I'm at with that. And just, yeah, I think it's partially it's leadership from the players and leadership from the coaching.
Yeah, I do think Jeremy Fears, I think, checks those boxes, and I think he is on his way to having a very good Michigan State career. I believe that. God willing, he's able to come back from this injury. And all of the reports on that have been very positive from Izzo himself and all those things. And so, but yeah, the kid seems to have that positive energy, but not like a fake way. He's got those qualities. I think the next step for Jeremy Fears will be when it's time to challenge a guy. Do we see that from him? Because all of he's always got a smile on his face. He's always engaged. I love that about the kid. That's the next step is can you challenge a teammate, maybe a guy who's older than you as well, and be that kind of guy. That's the next step for him. I think he's got the chops to do it. Unfortunately, I had this thought too. I don't know if it was coming back home or if it was yesterday, but I was thinking about like next season, and to do that with a Michigan State team is weird because it's always been about March for Michigan State. I wrote this down. The pieces are still here with this team to make a run. We've hammered that throughout the season, is that the pieces are here, the pieces are here, the pieces are here. Didn't know one way or another if it was all going to come together in March. I think after that loss to Ohio State for the first time all season, I think I can say at this point I would be surprised if a run happens. And it's just based on what we've seen this week. And now maybe that's an overreaction. They did win 8 of 10 games before these last 2 games. But I've got to see something even at Mackey. They don't even have to win the game for some of that life to come back, but like you got to go in there and you got to go toe to toe. Defending Edey is a chore, man. Like not only is the guy 8 feet tall, but I've seen the stuff like with the arm bars and some of the things he gets away with. And I'm a big guy, and so I appreciate some of letting the guys play down there, but at the same time, like the dude's big enough. Like you can't be like plowing people over. Like there's a limit there. There's a limit. And so we've got that to look forward to on Saturday. As much as I would love to see Booker out there more, I don't know if he gets the start because he's not going to match up with Zach Edey. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about, but I do think Xavier needs to be a regular part of the rotation. Like when Edey's off the floor, maybe boom, get him in the game. And there's different ways you can approach that. But again, just thinking about next year a little bit, that kind of caught me by surprise because again, it's March now, or it's almost March, and that's always what the season's been about.
Yeah, I know it's kind of crazy to think about that, and yeah, I like you said. I mean, it's going to be hard to find that matchup for Booker against Purdue, but I still think there's got to be a role for him. I think if Purdue comes out with a lineup where they have Edey and they also have First, I think that's a good time to get him out there. But yeah, I think game planning for Purdue is tough because you can just let Edey kind of back you down and baby everybody, or you can foul him and make him earn it at the line, which he's shown that he can do, and he's been better at foul shooting. And then their guards have been they're not the most skilled, but they do their jobs better than pretty much anyone in the country. Braden Smith is really good at just doing his job. And Matt Painter has talked about that, about how people have kind of said Braden Smith is not a top 10 guard in the country. And I fully believe he is, just based off of, again, it's just doing the way he runs that offense and can do his job. He's not the most skilled or talented, but he runs that system really well. And then you also have guys like Mason Gillis who, when Edey's not rebounding a ton, he's kind of scrappy and can get rebounds. And you have Fletcher Lawyer who can shoot. So, this team can beat you a lot of different ways. But it really depends on how you attack Edey. And then once you figure out how you can attack Edey, you kind of go from there. So I will see, especially with MSU's issue in the front court, how Izzo will game plan for it.
For sure. Just a few programming notes here, and then we'll get out of here. As always, visit our website over at si.com, College Michigan State. That's where we get all of our articles on coverage of the team. And, we've done some football stuff, not so much recently because there's not a lot going on before, spring practice gets going. But there will be once spring practice does get going. So check out our website over there. Follow us on Twitter there's our Twitter handles there. And we appreciate you guys joining us tonight. So Michigan State plays on Saturday and then Wednesday at home against Northwestern. So we'll probably pencil in another Tuesday show next week, 7:30. Well, we might be able to do 7:00, depending on my own coaching and how that goes this week. We're in districts. So might be able to do 7:00 next Tuesday, but we'll plan on a Tuesday show. And we'll go from there as far as the end of the regular season, and then it'll be tournament time. So appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Spartan Nation Podcast.